am a pastor, an artist, an author, a scholar, and a conversation. Welcome to Chatfest with Kenneth.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Chatfest with Kenneth. And for this episode, I am actually out here at the MGM National Harbor. Kind of cloudy day, and there's little droplets of rain, but I figure I want to do this. This is the area I feel like doing this today. So here goes. I hope the lighting is not that bad, but hey, at least you can see me, can't you? Okay, so for this episode, I am actually, the topic is the African community and mental health. I was invited to speak on the African community and mental health. I was invited as a consultant. And so I had to do my research because I am studying to be a mental health practitioner. I'm a PhD student of psychology. Just finished my coursework. I'm working on my dissertation. And so this organization found out about me and they invited me to speak as a consultant. And so I did my research and I want to share part of what I came up with, what I discovered in my research. So let's see here. Let me pull up my slide and okay, so mental health. What I know, mental health is a big thing right now because it seems like we're having so many issues with people having negative mental health or having mental health crises or episodes, and unfortunately it is resulting in death. In the news right now, someone was just killed by a passenger on a train on the subway in New York because he was having a mental health episode, and I guess he was being rowdy, and somehow they confronted him, which I'm not sure the details on it, but a physical encounter occurred in trying to subdue him, and it resulted in his death. So mental health is a major thing. Yes, we're seeing people, we're seeing episodes of people going to shoot up schools. We're seeing people committing suicide, people that you don't think will even be in a situation of committing suicide. And yet you find out that this person, that their life looks so put together, successful, and everything was in place, and yet they commit suicide. So it goes to show that the mental health of a person is not contingent on how successful their life is. It's not contingent on how put together they look. And yes, I am in the Western Hemisphere. So yes, this is prevalent in my society. And we used to think like, oh, mental health somehow it's not, this issue is not existing in African communities. That African communities are kind of secluded from it, they're shielded from it. And yet, we're seeing people in African communities committing suicide. We're seeing people in African communities experiencing severe depression, clinical depression. But somehow that label is not being put on it. Somehow there's still that major stigma on it that, oh, it's an American thing. It's a Western world thing. It's not an African thing. We don't deal with mental health in Africa. So this video is to strip off that myth about that, to expose, to bring more enlightenment, to bring more information, because information is power. So it is to bring enlightenment to it. So the first thing is, what exactly is mental health? Mental health basically is a general sense of mental well-being and ability to function in expected roles in life on a daily basis. So your mental health is what enables you to function in life. It can be negative mental health, positive mental health. But your mental health is just your stability, your mental stability. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, how we act. It influences our actions. It influences our decision making and how we function and how we are a productive member of society. It also helps determine how we handle stress, how we relate to others, and how we make choices. So if you see this, this is not something that is relegated to Western culture. Mental health is a human thing. It's as long as you are alive, you're a human being, you have mental health to deal with. It can be positive mental health, negative mental health, but you have mental health to deal with. So the mental health promotion is basically a distinct field that focuses on the multiple influences on mental health, because your mental health is influenced by several things. Your mental health, there is an influence on your mental health, and it's mental health promotion it's contextualized based on individuals or groups or communities. So you can have your individual mental health, and then you can have a communal or community mental health, which is basically the culture of that influences people from a particular community. So there's an individual mental health that you can have, and then there's a communal mental health that is let me give an example. Say the LGBTQI community. There already is a mental health for that community of being stigmatized, being oppressed. And so someone who is part of that community, unconsciously, subconsciously, can already subscribe to that ideology of being oppressed, of being stigmatized. And so some may victimize themselves, some may become in an effort to not be viewed as a victim, can overcompensate for it. But that's just an example of how there is a communal mental health and there's an individual mental health. Again, like Muslims, when 9/11 happened, there was a communal mental health that was associated with being a Muslim, someone from the Middle East living in America. There was a mental health they had to deal with regarding the identity of being a Muslim in America in post 9/11, especially when 9/11 happened. Mental health is not a momentary thing. It is a lifespan. So it's not something like, oh, I had a mental health crisis right now and it's over and I'm done. No. As long as you live, you're always going to be working on your mental health. As long as you have breath, you're going to be working on your mental health. And mental health, there are a couple of factors or multiple factors to take into consideration. Your gender can influence your mental health, your socio-economic status, your ethnocultural status. Ethnocultural status basically your ethnic culture and how it influences you, your racialized status, and your stage in life. Stage in life, for example, in America, the ageism is very real. So if you're of a certain age and you're in the looking for a job in the job market, you're going to be discriminated against. It's part of the things that we're trying to fight against. Ageism is one of them. The culture here does not celebrate being old. It's all about youth. It's all about being young. It's like being old is a death sentence. So there's an insecurity already in getting older. It's almost like you deny getting old. So there's always that fight to be young. Youth is being projected like pills that for us to pop and swallow on how to become young. So that's a life stage. And it's the reverse in Africa, in African culture, that someone who is older is celebrated. Getting older is celebrated. But I'll talk more on that later on. So, what makes the African community what distinct characteristics does the African community have? For one, it is a collectivist community. What do I mean by collectivist community? Collectivist, let's see. So some communities are individualistic, some communities are collectivist. An individualist community is the Western community, where being an individual is celebrated. It's like the whole thing is my identity. I discover who I am, find out who I am, my individuality, my autonomy. I want to be an independent, in control person of myself. I depend on no one. I'm my sole person. That's the Western world. The Western culture promotes individualistic mindset. The African community, on the other hand, is a collectivist community. It focuses on being a collective. There's interdependence. There's no I. I is actually when you've been excluded from the collectivist sense of collectivism, then that's when I comes in. In the African community, being interconnected in one another is celebrated. It's the goal. It's a nucleic family where it's not just your immediate family of father, mother, brother, sister. No, it's uncle, auntie, grandpa, grandma, granduncle, first cousin, second cousin, third cousin. There's this whole interdependency, and there is a shared value in the collective. There is a shared commonality. The value systems are all shared. There's an interdependence. Everybody's trying to support one another, lift up one another, and so the goal is to be connected in the part of the community. Nobody wants to be secluded. And actually, the way collectivist community works is there is a shared value system that everybody subscribes to. And if you are part of the punishment for not meeting a goal is they exclude you. You are threatened with exclusivity, like, oh, we will not include you into our collectivists. And so that's being part of the collectivist is like it's like a needed thing. It's part of what makes the African community what it is. And I think the Hispanic community have that same, is a collectivist community. The Middle East, collectivist community. Even Asia, the Chinese, they have, they're part of that collectivist community, that mindset of interdependence on one another, where you compromise self to elevate to conform to the values of the community. It's part of the whole. Conformity to the values and norms of the whole. And living in the Western world is the complete opposite of that mindset. So, what would you say? What would one say the genesis of mental health is? Mm, if you look at an individual, it can be biological factors such as your genes and your brain chemistry. Your temperament, it influences your temperament. It influences your learning strengths. It affects your growing social skills. So, like a child, when a child is born, the child is born with specific genes, and those genes influence the personality of the child, the temperament, how the child learns, what the child is gravitates towards, the intelligence of the child, because intelligence is not just academic. There are different kinds of intelligences. There is musical intelligence, there's body intelligence, and etc., etc. Your social skills on how to interact, all this are individual factors that influence one's mental health. Then there's a family factor. The family factor is influenced by the attachment theory. Attachment theory is basically the theory that exists that when a child is born, the child, there is a need to attach itself to a caregiver. And that's why it's an instinctive thing that's in the child, to attach itself to its caregiver, be it the mother, adopted parent, whatever it is. So the child begins to learn that when I cry, I get breast milk, I get food. And so it immediately learns that. And so it gets attention when it cries. And so it begins to sync these things together, like, oh, if I'm alone, I cry and I get attention. So it's the attachment, that's part of the attachment theory. Another family factor is parenting styles and parenting skills. The way a parent decides to raise a child influences that child's mental health. And the skills of the parent, like, oh, a parent can only do what they are informed to do. They can't do what they're not informed to do. So that also influences how a parent raises their child. It influences their mental health. There's a socio-economic factor, which would be your economic status determines what you have access to. And so somebody who grows up in a rural society is limited in their exposure, and so they're limited in what they're informed on, and how to understand self, how to explore their self. Their sense of self is limited to what they're exposed to, as opposed to somebody else who has more resources and they are more exposed in, be it secular education, traveling, and just interacting and having access to different things that will educate and inform. So your socioeconomic status also influences your mental health. And lastly, I would say nature versus nurture, because that's the eternal debate in psychology. Is what shapes a person? Is a person born this way, or does their social environment influence them to become who they are? And personally, I would say it's 50-50. Yes, your genetic makeup will your already predisposes you to certain things. But then the environment in which you grow up in now also influences and affects you. The environment you grow up in begins to structure you, the social influences while from a child, even while in utero, influences and structures how you grow up to experience life. Um, One other theory that I also believe influences mental health is the half empty, half full theory. Basically, the glass half empty, glass half full theory. And what is that? It's basically having a worldview of looking at the situation with either optimism or pessimism. And again, these are the influences that influence a person that determines how this person responds to life. So some people can be in a situation and it's the life's stressors shows up, and they will look at that situation and they'll look, even though there's so much negativity in it, they'll look at it and be like, glass half full mindset. So yes, they look at it like, well, I've lost all this, I've lost, but I still have this. And they focus on the optimism of life. Somebody else will be in that same situation and will focus on the pessimism. Will have a pessimistic outlook and be like, oh, I've lost this, I've lost this. Even though I have this, I've lost this, I've lost this, and my life is empty. And so that again is what, so you can't have a general rule for every person. Every person is different in how they respond, and that's what makes mental health very tricky, because you can never tell how someone really is processing a life stressor that they're going through. They can have a facade of everything looks great, but inside they're falling apart. And somebody else may look like they're falling apart on the outside, and inside they're really settled. Mental health is one thing to make a differentiation on. Is mental health is something we all deal with. It can be positive or negative. The negative mental health is what we call mental health disorders. So it's like a disorder in your mental health. A disorder shows up. So something like being suicidal. The concept of wanting to terminate one's life is not normal. Life is all about you. Instinctively, you learn to protect yourself. Instinctively, you learn to survive. Instinctively, you don't instinctively decide, I want to kill myself. That's a disorder. So there's mental health is the positive, negative, and the negative can be mental health disorders, and there are a variety of disorders. The spectrum can be something as little as depression and anxiety, panic attacks, and then it can go all the way to having being suicidal or having body dysmorphia, and on and on. So a state of well-being in which people across their lifespan can realize their own abilities, cope with life's normal stresses, work productively, and contribute to the community. That's a positive mental health. Let's see here. So, the African culture, from everything I've been saying so far, you can see that mental health, positive, negative, is not predicated to a specific culture. It's worldwide. Every culture deals with mental health. Now, the African culture does have mental health stressors. What is a mental health stressor? A mental health stressor is an influence, is an external influence. Sometimes it can be internal, but it's an influence that comes to trigger your mental health well-being, your mental health stability. That's something that has the potential to affect your mental health negatively. Something that has the potential to bring an upheaval in your mental health stability. In African culture, what we normally do is we normalize mental health stressors. That's how the African culture is. It's just normalized. Like, oh, even though a stressor shows up that can destabilize your equilibrium, your mental health equilibrium, then it's normalized. Like, oh, it's normal. That's how, which is denial. We just deny it and just pretend like it's normal. And so there is a threshold of tolerance that Africans have learned. Africans have learned tolerance. Right from childhood, we learn tolerance of the mental health stressors. But just because we tolerate it, just because we normalize it, does not mean it doesn't exist. Does not mean it is not a negative. It doesn't mean it doesn't have the potential to negatively affect. One of the things is female circumcision. Female circumcision has been something that has been going on in the African culture and normalized in the African culture. It's mutilation. The premise of female circumcision came from the fact that men feel like, oh, a woman's libido has to be cautioned because, oh, if she's sexual, she would be promiscuous and she's my property, so I need to curtail her sexual expression. I'm simplifying the origin of female circumcision. It's more deeper than that, but I'm just simplifying it. But female circumcision is something that has happened it's just in this modern age that we're now speaking against it. But even I'm 50, how old am I? 52. But I am aware that even in my time, in my youth, I saw where female circumcision was being propagated. And people who should, I guess I would say my people that I looked up to believed in female circumcision. I didn't know anything. I just heard that, oh, it's part of our culture, it's part of what we do. But it's not. It is a so can you imagine somebody who goes to a woman who goes to female circumcision? What trauma will that place on that woman? And yet the expectation is she has to normalize the fact that she has been mutilated. It's normalized. You can't have any negative response to it. You normalize it and you move forward. Another African culture thing is tribal markings. Tribal markings. Again, body mutilation. I know of people who have, like, a friend of mine had 27 marks on his face. Like, just marks. Can you imagine? And I can only imagine the mental trauma that this person went through growing up. Because yes, I know we used to tease this person, we used to laugh at this person, this whole peer pressure of just making fun of the marks on this person's face. And now that I'm older and I look back, I'm like, I wonder what mental health pressure was on this person, to especially regarding their identity of self, to look in the mirror and see all these markings of this disfiguration and be okay with self. Another African culture, child labor. It's normalized, like, oh, we call it getting a house help. You have a house girl, and the house girls are usually teenagers, preteens, and they come and they work from the rising of the sun to midnight. There is no rest. These children do all the labor. I remember I was having a conversation with somebody and I was like, this is slavery. This is modern day slavery. You have this 13-year-old girl. She wakes up at 5 o'clock and she's doing all this menial labor, and she's insulted, she's physically abused, sexually abused sometimes. She's like a property. Everybody uses her. Neighbors come and they sexualize her, and everybody sees her as a property. And nobody wonders the mental health of this person, how it affects this person. And this person grows up, has their own child. What mental health? Remember, earlier I was talking about parental styles and in raising their offspring. Now, how will this person raise their child with all the trauma that they have gone through? Is basically going to be transgenerational. They just transfer it over, and a mindset is carried over to the next generation. So child labor, and then even though I'm speaking not really extremes, but these are normalized activities in the African culture. But there's also something else: the rite of passage of youth. I went through that. The rite of passage of youth is I remember, I think I was 10 years old, and they said, oh, you have to learn how to kill a chicken. And so they gave me a knife and gave me a chicken and said, kill it. And in hindsight, I won't say it negatively affected me, but I had other issues to deal with, so that was probably minor. But again, a child learning how to do adult things. It's part of the African culture. There's a rite of passage. Sometimes some cultures take a child, a toddler, and throw the child in the water for it to learn how to swim. And it's part of the African culture. There's a rite of passage. I've seen on YouTube where some cultures circumcise the boys when they are they know what pain is. Like they are like toddlers. That's when they circumcise them. And so, even in the Bible, Abraham and co were circumcised in their old age. But hey, it's all normalized. We take it as normal, like, hey, it's okay. But there is a trauma that is being inflicted on a person. And that trauma being inflicted, you cannot pretend it away. It causes something. There is pain always. We respond to pain different. We either learn how to adopt something to medicate that pain, and usually it's a behavior. It's a response system that, if you analyze it, it has potential to be negative, to develop to condition us to respond negatively in some situations. So again, like I was saying, cultural views, the African cultural views, normalize trauma. Even like the repeated occurrence without the power or the resource to make change. Like things just happen and you feel handicapped to do anything. Let's look at, I think I mentioned earlier, cultural mental health. So look, I will take Nigeria. Look at Nigeria. The cultural mental health for the average Nigerian. So there was a politics, election was done. Everybody had a aspiration, anticipation for a particular candidate. Suddenly, thanks to corruption, it was just quenched. Now, what influence did that scenario have in the cultural mental health of people? I know people who just lost hope because they had built up so much hope in this candidate, and suddenly that was gone, and they just lost hope, like, oh, Nigeria is hell, Nigeria is doomed, and it's like, I have no hope of self, I have no hope to do it. It's like the aspiration to be productive, the aspiration to to look for the best in oneself and develop that was just quenched. Again, but that's things that are normalized. It's this negative mental health that influences the community in Nigeria. It's normalized. Look at the corruption that constantly happens. I'm sure people heard of End SARS. End SARS was a campaign that was triggered through social media to stop the corruption of having this police force that was just brutal, but just dehumanizing people. And again, when you live in a culture where that is normalized, there is something that it does to you. Look at South Africa, for example. Apartheid. The apartheid that is there, that was there, still there, depending on how you look at it. What influence did it have on the mental health of people? And when you say, oh, just normalize it, this is how life is, and just keep moving, the dissonance that it creates inside has to be addressed. The dissonance that it has initiated inside a person is going to find expression one way or another. A dissonance, which is the contradiction between thoughts and feelings and behavior, resulting in inner imbalance. So dissonance is like that thing that, like a disruption in your inner balance, your inner sense of peace. There's that disruption. There's a contradiction. You have one value system, but your reality is something else. There's an imbalance. There's something that is inside, and the human response is to medicate dissonance. You medicate it one way or another. You either use chemicals, or you find a behavior to medicate it. You find some way, like, oh, I can't beat it, I join them mindset. And again, I'm doing a build up to show that Africans, we've had residual mental health trauma that we have normalized, and we've just been carrying forward from our parents and from our own experiences, and we're just carrying it forward and moving forward with it like, oh, it's okay. But it is not okay. If we don't address it, it is not okay. Where's my next slide? So, living in Africa is traumatic. I will tell you, it is traumatic. Even the people living in Africa know it's traumatic. No matter how much they normalize it, they know it's traumatic. The cost of living versus the standard of living. Like, it's almost like you have this minimal income that you have to miraculously stretch to cover a myriad of expenses. Can you imagine this mental trauma a parent goes through, knowing that this is your limited income, but somehow you have to make this income take care of 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you act like the expectation is act normal, like everything is okay. Just act normal. Corruption being accepted as a culture. Like in Nigeria, corruption has been accepted like a cult. It's cultural to be corrupt. It's part of the culture. But being corrupt has it's affective. It affects. The government's lack of governing, um, it's almost criminal, where the government literally just squanders. They don't. It's not even. It's not even sub. No, but it's not even. It's it's obvious. There is no duplicity about it. It's like just in your face corruption, where roads are. I remember when last year, when the flood happened, there was a massive flood that happened that affected about 33 states. And I remember students were going to do exams, and some schools did not cancel the exam. So here you have these students trying to go do exams to better their because they want to get into university, and they had to cross rivers like neck deep waters, waist deep water. Just trauma of living, just a trauma of daily living, and that trauma is normalized. We just take it as normal, like, hey, it's what goes on here, so we accept it and that it's okay. uh Let me see here. So, being in Africa, being of an African community, there are side effects and after effects of things that we've gone through. One, colonialism, for example. Colonialism happened. Um, um, if you're an adult and you don't know what colonialism is, you should educate yourself on what colonialism is. Um, but colonialism, when it happened, yes, I'm sure when the Christians came and they were coming to eradicate an existing culture to present Christ, they probably thought they were doing a good thing. And maybe they were, because I'm a Christian. So I'm subjective in my reasoning, in my analysis. But in the application of their intention, how it was done, was it great? There were situations where people were literally forced, cultures were being forced to deviate and begin to think in a certain way, to accept a new culture. A new culture was being force-fed on them. Cultural imperialism is what we'll call it. Was happening. Now, the mindset that was developed, there's a side effect and an after effect. Let me give you an example. I remember when I was a young, I think I was maybe 10 or 11, and I watched there's this apartheid movie that I watched. I watched that movie, and when I watched that movie, I had a hatred for white people. I won't say I had a hatred for white people, but there was this feeling that after seeing how these white people were just dehumanizing people and using dogs to bite and kill people for just being black, like for just being black, and were just being treated as something less than human. I remember this feeling that I had, and it was a feeling like, oh, I don't, white people are, it's like, as I'm a 10-year-old child, I just generalized it like, oh, these are how white people are. And thank God for the value system of how I was raised. So I knew subconsciously that, nah, I don't think I like movies like this. So I remember subconsciously I just hated anything that had to do with a movie that will shove that reality in my face. I did not want that. I remember when my family was watching Roots, the original one. I don't think they allowed me to watch it, but I think I would sneak, and I saw some sections like, nah, this is too much for me. Even now, as an adult, I still can't watch. I still wouldn't watch Roots because it's, I don't know, maybe I'll call it, it's triggering. It's triggering the feeling that I had when I was a child of how I disliked the way my view of white people, and I don't want to feed that feeling, and so I kind of like, nope, But I'm aware of the feeling inside of me. I'm aware of it. Um, and so there's the colonialism, the after effects of colonialism, the way people begin to look at white people, and the father teaching his child, and his child teaching his child. Um, there's apartheid, same thing. But then there's also tribalism. Tribalism is now where we are now doing it on ourselves, where you have the main um, tribe. Look at me, I can't even explain what tribalism is. Tribalism, which is basically a majority tribe victimizing the minority tribe. And now there's a conflict between, oh, I'm this tribe and this tribe is better than that tribe. You are from this tribe and you're not, I cannot associate with you because your tribe is evil. Again, communal mental health, where, oh, people who are Igbo, they think this way. How did we come to that? I remember when growing up, I would hear that, oh, you want to marry an Igbo girl. Igbo people are like this. Igbo people are like that. Isoko people are like this. Oh, so there's that. You just have this mindset of a group of people that this is how they behave. And you know what? Subconsciously, maybe that is how they behave too. Where they've adopted, I'm sure there is a characteristic that was evident where people started labeling, stereotyping people from that tribe. And so tribalism exists. There's a side effect of tribalism. There's an after effect of tribalism. We have seen where tribalism has led to wars, conflicts, killings. The mental effect. What does that have on the mental health of a people? And how they move forward and how they respond. All these are part of mental health. But we don't talk about such things in the African culture because we just assume like, no, we don't deal with mental health. But we have new major mental health stressors. Major mental health stressors. I did touch on cultural imperialism. Now this is a tricky one. Because, okay, when you talk of colonialism was cultural imperialism being forcefully advocated on a community, And then if you know your history, there was a fight for independence, and we have our patriarchs in Nigeria who helped to fight for our independence. Okay, so there's that era. But now we are still in a new era of cultural imperialism, and it's called westernization, the westernization of Africa. What is that? Education, information, technology, industrialization, and globalization is resulting in the westernization. The Western mindset, the Western culture is, yes, it's a good thing. Information, education, even right now what I'm doing is as a result of a Western influence. So there's a positive side of westernization. There's the positive impact. And yet there's also the negative impact of westernization, because as you remember, I said the African culture is a collectivist culture. The Western culture is an individualist culture. So now we are adopting the influence of the West. But you can't pick and choose. Like, oh, I pick this and I don't pick this. I pick this and I don't pick this. I wish it was that easy. Yes, theoretically, it's supposed to be like that. Practically, it's not. The moment you start inculcating aspects of a cultural influence, subconsciously, the other aspects that you are not inculcating begins to slip in. So now we are sacrificing our collectivist value system and adopting individualist value system. which is contrary to our awareness, it's contrary to our identity, contrary to what we were raised up in. Now, for the newer generation, sure, that's, I guess, the newer generation, that's the influence they know. But again, there's still going to be a struggle, because now you're in a collectivist culture with the value system of a collectivist culture and influences of an individualist culture. So now you struggle with it too. I take this, I don't take this. I take this, I don't take this. There's that duality, struggle of duality. We of the older generation grew up in I still have that struggle myself, because yes, I was born in Chicago. Actually, not born in Chicago. I was born in Macomb, Illinois, but nobody knows where Macomb is, so I go with Chicago. And growing up, there was always the individual collectivist value system being taught, but there was that also individualist value system that I was aware of, that had its influences in me. And so there was always that struggle between the two. 1 minute I'm here, 1 minute I'm there, 1 minute I'm struggling, and I still struggle with it even now. As much as I want to say, oh, I'm so westernized, but no, I am still an African man, and I still have some value systems that I hold that are African in certain situations, and I find myself wondering, like, oh, is this how I really feel about this? Even though cognitively I think this, but my conditioning and my priming, I'm beginning to respond in this way. So cultural imperialism is happening. Social media, movies, education, even globalization, industrialization is now bringing aspects of value systems of the West being introduced to us. And we are now having to struggle, like, okay, how do I respond? Do I respond in a collectivist way, or do I respond in an individualist way? Now, the question is, why would that even matter? Well, it matters because Afrocentricity is basically being African, the African culture, celebrating the African culture. And African culture had its ways of addressing mental health issues that were not so documented. So let's say go back go back 70 years. The way the African culture operated then, there was a community. Everybody was part of the collectivist. There was a patriarchal or matriarchal person that everybody looked up to. Now, probably not a matriarchal, because her role will be subdued in a masochistic community. The woman is always subdued. If an issue came up, if there was an issue, the person runs to the elders. Whatever the elders say, the elders had the wisdom of counsel based on years of experience, based on age, and based on position. So the counsel of the elders was what the members of the community depended on. You can look at it in the Bible. Solomon was there, the wisdom, avatar of wisdom, and two women came with an issue, child, and he came and he gave his counsel. Moses too was giving counsel, and Jethro had to tell him, like, hey, you're going to spend your whole days giving counsel to all these people. Select other leaders to give counsel. So yes, that's the collectivist culture. There's always been a patriarchal person, a person in a position of authority that gives counsel, that intercedes for personal issues. So that was the Afrocentric form of therapy and counseling. That was the Afrocentric way of dealing with it. Like you have an issue, you go meet the oh, I wonder who they're chasing. Anyway, I got distracted. So that was the African way of dealing with of counseling. Another African way was peer counseling, like your peers, because there was a social network, there was a social connectivity. So your peers could always tell you, the influence of your peers was acceptable. There was no individualistic thing like, oh, I am me, I am mine, me, mine. No, there was not that mindset. So you have the patriarchal influence, you have family influence, uncle, auntie, everybody can speak into your life. Everybody's involved in your life. Everybody wants to know what's going on in your life. And they had the right to be involved in your life. And it was accepted because in the collectivist culture, there is no I, there's no me. It's us, we. There's no individualism. You're part of the collectivist. And so the collectivist can speak into your life. The value system is you want the collectivist to speak into your life. And so that's how the African culture dealt with mental health counseling. That's how they developed positive mental health. Even with the traumatic things that they did, that's how they addressed it. Female circumcision, as traumatic as it is, the women will now gather around the woman that was circumcised. And they will now, oh, I was done to me. Yeah, it was done to me. I was part of it. Oh, look at me. I'm healthy now. But again, their mindset was subservient. Their mindset was accepting this as normal. And so they normalized it so it was normal. But now you have the Western world has now come in. The value system of the Western world has come in. Now we are learning what individuality is. How are we as Africans adopting a value system of the West, negating our collectivist system, but not adopting the prescription of how to address mental health of the Western? For those who just missed that, let me explain that. So, the Western world, individualism, the way mental health is dealt with is you go see a mental health practitioner, because we're all individuals. Nobody's going to come speak into your life. Nobody's coming. You're about to go crazy on the street. Ain't nobody going to come help you. You're just going to be on your own until somebody kills you off somewhere. Okay, that's not funny. But that's how the West deals with mental health. The only time you will get somebody speaking into your being concerned about you is when you become a social nuisance. Then they either arrest you and lock you up or put you in confinement or something. Or you go seek for help. But now, we as Africans who are now dealing with two cultural influences, our collectivist cultural influence, which is our foundation of what we grew up in, versus the individualism culture of westernization that we are now inculcating, and we are now subscribing to that. But yet, we don't go to counseling. We don't go out to meet somebody to discuss our mental health. And yet, we don't subscribe to the old school of, oh, everybody is involved in my life and can speak into my life. Now we're like, oh, I'm an individual, I'm a professional, I'm a doctor. I make this, so you can't come, my papa in the village cannot come and start speaking into my life. I was like, Papa, this is a new generation. You don't understand the new world. It's a new world. New world problems, new realities, new awareness, new discoveries that are happening to us. But we're embracing all this, and some are trying to hold on to the old. We can't hold on to the old because the old is not going to work. We're not living in that world. That world is over. Westernization has ended that world. It is ending it. So we need to embrace westernization because we have no choice but to embrace it. We need to embrace it and use the tools to deal with our mental health. Right now, For example, in living in Lagos is no matter how much you want to say, oh, we're African and we're living African way. Living in Lagos is a Western world because you have traffic, you have electrical power, no lights, no power. You have to get up and go to work. You have to you have a 9 to 5 that you have to struggle with. You have social network to deal with. That's not part of our old school African culture. Old school Africa. This is a new world. This is industrialized experience that we're living in. I live in America and I can't even deal with Lagos stress because it's too stressful for me. I can't deal with it. I'm like 4 hours in traffic every day, to and fro. I can't. It's too much. But these are the stresses that people deal with and have normalized these stresses. And not realizing that, hey, these stressors that you're dealing with, you have to find an outlet to address it some way or another. Now, I got to give credit. In Africa, our way of dealing with stress is church. Church is where people go and they exhale in church. They go meet a pastor for counseling. And so pastors and religious leaders have taken the new counselors, the new influences to deal with mental health. Unfortunately, the pastors, a majority of them are influenced by the corrupt culture. And so there is an agenda when they are counseling. Their counseling session is not objective, completely objective. There's always a catch of, let me get my tithe from you. Let me get my money from you. Let me get something from you. Let me get sexual favor from you. Before there's something, there's always and again, I'm not saying all. I didn't say all. I said some. I said majority. Because all you need to do is go to YouTube and Google it. You will see the shenanigans that are going on. And you're like, what is going on? Anyway, so Afrocentricity, basically recognizing the inability for Afrocentric worldview to function in a westernized world without incorporating Western ideals and values. New world problems. Better standard of living has made us aware of normalized trauma. Would I even have known about normalized trauma if I was in the village going to fetch water and come back and I didn't go to, I didn't do I wasn't a PhD student in psychology. Would I even know about normalized trauma? I probably would, but not to the level that I am aware of it now, because I have looked at, I've psychoanalyzed myself and looked at myself and realized, like, wait, a lot of things that I am dealing with, a lot of compensations that I'm making for in life, generated from a conditioning that happened here. And for me to compensate, I now develop this, I now develop that. And so in unpacking my baggage, I'm beginning to see, oh, well, so I have cultural baggage, individual baggage, cultural baggage, and I'm not the only one. Other fellow Africans have the same experiences, and finally, how long have I been? I don't know. I'm just going on because I'm trying to just hit the main points and go. Modern day Africa. The modern day African and acculturation. What is acculturation? I think I have talked about, I didn't use that word, but I talked about it. Acculturation is when you are inherent in one culture, and then there is an influence of another one that you have to contend with. Is a struggle. Especially immigrants deal with that a lot. So you have an immigrant family. At home, the child is inculcated with the culture of mom and dad. But then the child goes to school and the child is being influenced by the culture of where they are now living. And so now the child has to figure out, who am I? Am I the culture in school, or am I the culture at home? Most times we pick and choose. When we're home, we act one way. When we're in school, we act another way. So there's a duality, a duplicity that's going on. And so now we think we can switch it off and turn it off. Unfortunately, conditioning happens. And so you think you will react this way, but there is a subconscious priming that has happened. That subconscious priming now causes you to respond in a way you didn't think you would respond when the situation happens. You wouldn't know any of this if you just normalize yourself and don't think you are acculturized. But we all are. We all are acculturized. Counseling or seeing a mental health practitioner, an informed mental health practitioner, can help you unpack yourself so you know who you are and you are aware of what your cultural baggage are, individual baggage. And so when you're faced with a situation, you don't question yourself like, okay, I responded this way. And you know why you responded this way. You may not agree with it, but you understand why you responded this way. And so that's where we Africans, especially Africans living in the diaspora, we have the influences, or we have the resources to go for counseling. We have African counselors. Hey, I'm an African counselor. We have access to people who understand our struggle, that we can go unpack our baggage and learn to see how the dissonance that is within us because of the two value systems that we're struggling with. And then Africans who are in Africa, they are not exempt from it, because they too are now influenced by westernization, globalization. So I've seen Africans who are living in Nigeria who are even more westernized than me living here in America. Like, they are more the influences of media, social media, traveling, and just different influences that have affected the way we process self. So I know I've gone on and on. I hope I did make some sense in what I was saying. I hope also that this will help you look inside, examine inside, and see yourself, and see areas where you've had negative mental health that has been normalized, trauma that has been normalized, and as a result of normalizing it, the dissonance that was instigated because of that trauma and resulting in a behavioral response in one way or another that has been justified and normalized can be unpacked. And the whole point of this is find your positive mental health, where you're in a space where you're not justifying negative behavior, where you're not justifying behavior that is not productive, behavior that is not enabling your oneness with self. No need to justify it, no need to explain it, no need to label it. No, just call it for what it is. And just because you call it for what it is doesn't necessarily mean you are wrong, you're an evil person. No, you're not an evil person. You just are responding to what life has dealt you, and you package yourself in a certain way to respond to life. Doesn't mean you got to be like that. Well, that's the end. And I would click subscribe, click like, share this video with people. And hey, if you want me to come speak to your organization about this, I am available. Thank you.